conversation in a respectful way, she is going to just kick me and ban me from everything. It's my point of view that this is to prevent me from responding to anything, and to prevent me from speaking about my side of this.
Either overtly or by complicity. Like, you're actually unironically making the argument right now.
Okay, well, to be clear, but complicity is not the same thing as what we were talking
They
about.
are functionally the same. Oh my god.
They're functionally.
I cannot believe this. Hold on. I have to ask you. Because
Sure.
this is all right. Hold on. If you let's like create a hypothetical political party where the person who I voted for, like the person who you were voting for was like a a trans fascist, all right, and they
I know,
believe
the spicy.
That, all cis people
experiment.
need to die immediately. And I looked at that and I was like, well, I mean, like, I don't really care so much about that issue, but like, I like the other stuff that they're talking about, so I guess like I'm fine with it. Like, are you unironically going to say that I'm not complicit in that action by voting for that person? Like, if you were to die.
You would be complicit if you vote for someone.
Riley's
you are complicit in whatever they do.
Spiked.
Okay, cool. So that's what we're talking about.
I was not contending with that. I was talking about what conservatives on the ground believe, Riley.
Yeah, and if you either overtly or complicitly, if you either agree with these things overtly or conversely, if you're complicit in them, if you acknowledge that those things exist but you don't do anything about them, then that's that's tantamountly the same.
Okay, I disagree, but I need to say something really quick. How can I go back in the stream and actually clip this for you? Because I actually don't functionally know how to do this, and I want to demonstrate that I actually did come in here in good faith. Because I actually
you actually came in here in good faith.
Wait,
I'm pretty sure. I'm looking at my chat. Like everyone seems to agree that you're like either trolling or very like seriously trying to gaslight. Like, I don't know what you're trying to do.
I'm literally trying to ask you for help so I can provide you with the evidence right now.
I only watched a little bit of Drew and Anna Pearls. I know what you're talking about, though.
Oh, if you're not,
I know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure that I make it so that only subscribers or followers, one of the two, are able to clip. Because often people come in here and they try to like pull some
Riley's
shit where they like
an early start.
Yeah,
I understand.
They're trying to
I mean, I guess I understand with what Riley's been through. Chat, if you don't know it, like, this is the hard part of the job, is, managing personal relationships, especially when there's a lack of understanding. And Riley had to deal with a lot, and I covered it, with Demon Mama. Even though I kind of agree, I kind of came down on Demon Mama's side, I still felt a lot for Riley in terms of what she had to deal with, with so many people in her community seeming to turn on her. And that's, I actually know what that feels like, from a while ago. Maybe it was last summer even. But so, and I did want to have her on and talk to her and about that, but I don't know. She because of that whole situation, she may not trust me that much. And if not, I understand. I kind of understand why she's where she's at, but it's too bad, because I really don't think that whatever she thought you were doing, like, I didn't see.
Yeah, and what sucks about this is because like I'm sort of like a weird person on the right. Like, I'm kind of all over the place, and so like there's a lot of ideas that I have that aren't really set in stone. And I found Riley basically through the Demon Mama stuff, and I felt incredibly bad for Riley because it seemed like a horrifically stressful and upsetting situation for like, because like it was like she was upset with her community, and like she was feeling like her ideas were being attacked, and then like her mods were trying to get her to stop, and I felt so bad during the situation watching this. And I was like, this seems like a really honest person trying to like really try hard to make their ideas as strong as possible, who's kind of gotten in a really bad situation here. And so I gained a lot of respect of her through that. And I thought in the previous conversation that I had with her that there was a little bit of confusion, and I thought that, oh well, sure. I mean, Riley's a reasonable person. I can talk to her about this. Like, it's not going to be a big deal. And um, I don't know exactly what caused her to be so set off initially. Part of it was that I feel like I contributed it to a little bit because I was saying Riley's name in the middle, and I feel
Yeah.
like, and looking back on it, my intention is never to intentionally upset people, but like especially given like the history of how things are, like I understand that like she's probably got to be on guard for people trying to set her off. So what's unfortunate for me is that I feel like because I was banned from everything, I can't actually set things right with Riley. So I was happy to be able to be at least be on Steven's platform to express publicly my apology to her, so that at least she could like hear it, even though I can't directly tell it to her because she won't, like, I can't engage with her.
Right.
I'm glad that she was able to hear it. I think that there's still a little confusion about what actually happened on her part because she won't talk to me. Um, but insofar as she's upset, obviously I don't want to contribute to that, and it sucks that I
Right.
don't
Right.
don't feel like I can remedy things because I've been
And we're
blocked and stuff.
definitely, like, from what I hear from you and from how I feel, we are not here to, like, disparage Riley at all. I
No,
don't
not
see
at
it
all.
as like Riley's a bad person. I don't see it
Nope.
as like Riley's, anything. Like, I just I feel like she got the wrong impression of, what you were trying to do. And there's the funny thing is that, and the reason, like, I was asked why I'm covering this. This is emblematic of a disconnect between the left and the right in terms
Yep.
of like how we understand things and how you understand things on the right. And I feel like Riley was trying to posit something that, from our point of view, if we don't step on the left, if we don't step outside of our point of view, it seems like a no-brainer. It
Right.
seems like wait, if you don't admit this, then, yeah, I don't want to know you, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
or there's no talking to you, right? And it's really actually a little bit more complicated. There's more steps to it, I guess, is what I noticed. And but it's kind of like you're in education, right? You understand, like, there's a difference between like learning something yourself and then turning around and teaching it to people who don't know any of it. Because especially if you're in that TA position, you've been immersed in this stuff for 4 years plus. And so, there's some stuff that to you that should not need explanation that absolutely does need explanation. And it's just really hard to, and I realize that I risk coming off as pedantic here because I'm not trying to say like we have this advanced knowledge that we'd like to share with you, down there on the right. I'm actually not trying to come off like that. I mean, there might be something that, we could learn from you. We can definitely learn more about how each other actually feels rather than relying on what are often portrayed as like straw man versions of real people's sentiments from both sides. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really important about what you just said is that sometimes the things that are obvious to us are completely out of bounds for people that are different than us. So like if you're having a conversation with somebody you genuinely disagree with, just because something's obvious to you, it's very much not obvious to the other person a lot of times. And unfortunately, I feel like with this previous conversation, I feel like Riley sort of drew some conclusions that were wrong about what I was actually trying to say, and things just got like way crazy. And so it's like one thing in particular that was sort of frustrating is that um, she's under the impression that I had a different position on Twitter than I did when I had the conversation, which is just not true. And so the miscommunication, and I actually thought about this a lot when I was listening to Riley talk about the conversation, was um, so she made a position, and then I objected to the evidence she provided for that position, not the actual position. And that, looking back, sounds confusing, right? Because I'm saying, okay, well, I object to the evidence you're providing, but I actually don't disagree that propaganda is fear-based. Like that's
yeah.
like very, very obvious. But the evidence she provided, I felt like was a mischaracterization of like how people on the right actually feel. And so that's what it got turned into. And then she also feels like, I think that I was saying that she thought all Republicans think these things when that's also not what I said. So when I actually went through the transcript of the conversation, I actually never utter the words all Republicans or every Republican. It just didn't happen in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I feel like those two main points of disconnections, Riley still thinks I believe, or I think that she thinks believes, because I can't talk to her to clarify. Those miscommunications are still on the table because, and those are sort of the things that she's hanging her hat on, is like, oh, well, if he came in here with a different position than the one he was arguing with me about, then obviously he was lying to me.
The
or
classic
misrepresenting
Mott and
himself.
Bailey debate bro tactic. Yeah. And there is a lot of that going around, right? That does happen.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Especially because she didn't know who I was. She thought I was a random guy off of Twitter. So I assumed that she was like, oh, this is a random guy from Twitter, not Drew, the guy who's been trying to be as reasonable as possible with lefties on Twitch. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and also getting introduced as a Jordan Peterson fan maybe isn't like there's a lot of lefties that hear that and they think, certain things.
Yeah, it primes the conversation for sure. Yeah.
Mike Dixie, I have never been trolled from the left before, but I don't actually think that you're to the left of me, so stick around and stuff. Like, right? I don't know. I don't know if you came in at a weird time or whatever, but yeah, I'm a leftoid as well. But anyway, this is God, where the fuck were we? I let chat derail me. That's my problem. No. In terms of debates and so the one other disconnect that I noticed, and it's something that we had actually, was that I think that you read Twitter in a different way than she does. And I was, I don't know, actually, I can't really say which way one of your ways is more common, but it's the way that she does it is a similar way that I do it, that it's more about shit posts. It's more about slogans. It's more about the, emotion that you're conveying, just because Twitter is such a shit medium to actually be able to discourse, and that so many bad things happen when we try. And so, if you try to hold me to my exact words on Twitter, I will usually, say, actually, yeah, no, you're right. That's not, that's not that, I said all conservatives do such and such. And, really, that was obvious. That was an exaggeration. I didn't mean it. It's kind of what I'll say. But it's so easy to get locked into that debate mind where you're just you don't want to grant something like that. That doesn't even really matter that much.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, is that I think that, and this is very easy to do. This is not something Riley's not unique in this. I think that Riley felt probably at the end of the conversation that she got caught defending something she actually doesn't even believe, or feels like I was mischaracterizing her, and that is really easy to have happen. To be clear, that's not anything wrong with Riley. It's just a miscommunication.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. I do view Twitter as different, right? And the way I view Twitter is I actually sort of watch Twitter as sort of I put out a little bit of stuff, but I don't tweet a lot. And then usually when I'm tweeting, I'm critiquing the how bad Twitter is. So if you notice, the original tweet that I put out was not a lot of nuance here, but I guess Twitter be Twitter. That was yeah. So the whole point of my initial thing was this is the reason Twitter's bad.
So as much as it was a dig, it was a blunted dig. It wasn't it wasn't a dunk. It wasn't anything like that. No. It's hard to characterize it as it being aggressive by any means.
Yeah, I was it was more sort of a frustration because I actually respect Riley, because I was I kind of expect better out of you, Riley. But I mean, in truth, after the conversation, I find it hard to believe that Riley thinks that Republicans think all Muslims are terrorists. That's a really crazy extreme position. She probably doesn't believe that after the conversation. I think that we got caught up in some weird miscommunication, and I'm just going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's sort of operating under false assumptions about me rather than...
It seems like the kind of thing that's really easy to say, all, like you throw in all as a modifier. And in language, that means something very specific. But I guess on Twitter, to a lot of us, it kind of just, it's like a way of putting emphasis on something.
It's a hyperbole.
But yeah, I'm I won't, I'm not trying to equivocate or anything. I'm not trying to say that well, really, even though it was not true technically. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not true, but yeah, it's the kind of thing that wasn't, super central. The real interesting argument though is the question of, how well, I guess Republicans think, and then the secondary question of how do lefties think that Republicans think? Like,
Yeah,
what
that's it.
what are our real points of view versus what are our perceived points of view of the other, and
Yeah,
where do those
yeah.
vary?
And that's such an interesting conversation, and I would love to talk about that all the time. And that's kind of where I wanted the conversation to go. Unfortunately, we didn't get there. But it had Riley said this was just over, like this was over exaggeration because of Twitter, I would have dropped my whole complaint. Basically,
Yeah.
because I mean, like if she wasn't going to own the position, then she wouldn't. It's just like I felt like throughout the conversation, like all it would have taken is she would have just said, no, that's not my position, and the conversation would have ended, right?
I'm trying to
But
remember how it began. She was like responding to something like that she saw on
I,
Twitter, and then you
yeah,
responded to her response, right?
yes, I actually know exactly how everything unfolded because I've been involved in this for a few days. So exactly what happened was PragerU made
Oh, that's right.
this
Yeah.
stupid tweet about how people who are afraid aren't free or some dumb crap like that, right? And she made the correct point that all conservative propaganda is based on fear, which is true. And then listed a series of positions as like callbacks to like fear invoking positions or whatever. But like a couple of the positions I thought were made out to be like actual positions of the right. So I critiqued that. And then her specific tweet that brought me on was like straw man positions question mark. It seems like a weird way to characterize these pretty mainstream conservative beliefs. And that's the tweet that actually got me drug on. And then as soon as I got in there, she started saying, "Oh, well, these are straw men." That's pretty interesting because I thought that these were things that people have said openly, and that's like so. We started
Mm-hmm.
on the straw man point, and that's like when this conversation started. Although I think in the back of her head, she was thinking that I was objecting to the fear thing on the basis of the thing, but I was actually only objecting to the positions, not the fear thing. So, yeah,
Yeah. And you
yeah,
talked to Destiny about that, and it kind of like like
yeah.
he brought that up, and the Riley thing. Like I didn't actually that didn't even like I didn't even notice that when it happened. I can see how it would maybe
Well, the thing.
make
So
somebody mad, but like it didn't seem. But like yeah, I think there. I guess there's two ways of hearing that. You know what I mean?
So that's one of the things is that it like just because I upset her doesn't mean I was intending to,
Right.
but just because I wasn't intending to doesn't mean that I didn't upset her. And that's my point is that like
Yeah.
if I upset her, then I'm sorry because it really doesn't matter my intentions because it
And
makes
you were
sure.
super forthcoming with that apology. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, like, look, I mean, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Like, I'm not one of these people on the right who's like fucking shitting on facts or feelings all the time. Feelings are great. They like make us who we are, and feeling bad sucks. So I don't want to make her feel
Mm-hmm.
that way.
No, that's
Yeah,
definitely like there's people on both sides that it could use a little bit more of that understanding that,
yeah,
a lot like, even if we might trust our facts objectively more, our feelings are going to, being informed on our feelings is definitely going to be, especially if if you think that bias is coming from them, the only way you're going to actually perceive that bias is by being more in touch with it rather than trying to be like,
yeah.
no, I'm a
Ignoring it.
being of pure logic and everything that I do
Yeah.
is nothing but,
Which by the way is not true. We are not beings of pure logic. We're
it's
emotional beings.
yeah, it's
and
impossible, I mean,
it's
like
yeah,
some people
yeah,
would like to try, but yeah, it's even like, the phrase like grounding your axioms, I mean, like we're talking about hooking them onto other things and hooking them onto other things, but eventually the thing that we're hooking onto kind of floats in space.
yep,
And that space being the assumptions that that we make in life, even metaphysical assumptions,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah, and it just sucks to me because I feel like it would be really nice to be like, yo, I'm sorry, and sort this out because I don't feel like there's the need for the bridge to be like full TNT destroy I like okay
yeah.
like there's no reason although I do understand that it's probably like very reasonably you have to be a little bit like protective of yourself on this platform because if you let every person that you perceive to be a troll through out of like trying not to burn bridges, you're gonna get just your
Oh
mental
God,
health is
yeah.
just gonna spiral because it's just too much to deal with all the time. So
Yeah.
I understand exactly what's going on. It's just it sucks because I'm one of the people that would actually like to apologize. You know?
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like, there are bad faith actors out there. There are people that
Yep.
like sometimes it's just like having a very simplistic model of like how like content works that will get somebody into that mindset of like, well, okay, so if I cause a controversy, then my stock goes up, right? And it's like, you know, that's like saying if the wind blows hard, then my sailing boat goes vroom. Well, yes, and it might go vroom in the wrong direction, and it might get capsized, and it might, you know what I mean? There's like so many more considerations than just like, you know, like can I get some eyeballs, you know, because it's really easy to, you know, like bring a bunch of eyeballs in to watch you train wreck. You know, we've seen plenty of examples of that.
Yeah, and the other things that really concern me is just like I feel like so the like the gaslighting thing and the crazy making thing are two accusations that have been levied at me. And I think it's really important to realize that those are actually really specific things. Like if I'm if I was in there and I was trying to literally argue with Riley about like how like things about reality were wrong, or like lying, like straight up lying about things that I had said, maybe you could argue as gaslighting, but I wasn't doing those things. And crazy make it like these two things are like really serious accusations that are like a tantamount to like emotional abuse. And so I think that we have to be really careful on this platform about actually like levying those accusations. We have to like have really good evidence for them, because they're really serious accusations. I mean, like when you're talking about like within my area of study within like mental health, I mean, like you're talking about like abuse is what you're talking about. And you gotta make sure that if you're throwing around those terms, you really know what you're talking about, because it's just really
unfortunately, as the awareness of abuse has you know gone up, so has the, you know, maybe the weaponization of the idea of abuse to the point where it's just like it gets levied in almost every situation.
Yeah, and
there probably is a lot of abuse going on. Like I'm not trying to diminish that, but the whole thing of like, you know, two people just accusing each other of Darvo back and forth. I mean, it's
so like the thing is like there has to be space for like average level of conflict that doesn't rise to the level of abuse, because abuse is a very specific thing.
Isn't there a book about this?
There might be.
Contra mentioned a book called, does anybody remember in chat? It was called something like Conflict is Not Always Abuse or something to that.
Well, I mean, I agree with that, whatever the book is called, because the truth is like what happened when we had our conversation is well within the realm of normal human misunderstanding and being upset. Like we were both upset. I was very frustrated. I don't show it as much as she does. But that's just a difference in temperament. That has nothing to do with like either of us being right or wrong, right? She's not wrong because she was upset, right? I'm sure that there are plenty of people that watched that and thought she was right, but obviously she's wrong because she's upset. I disagree with that. So just because you're upset, you're not wrong. It's just we have different ways of expressing that, and mine came across as like patronizing or talking down to her to some people. When I was really just trying to plead with her to not interrupt me, but for her, she just raised her voice and stuff, which is like, I mean, she was frustrated. It's fine. But that's all well within the realm of like regular human miscommunication, not me abusing her or trying to manipulate her because I'm a psychopath. It's not. We're not talking about that level of stuff, and I just think that we need to be more careful on this platform about throwing around those accusations, because they're very, very serious, and they actually throwing them around too much actually trivializes them, because if someone actually is emotionally manipulated, then people are gonna already making memes out of the gaslighting word now, because so many people say it that people no longer take it seriously, even though it's a very serious thing. When it's actually happening, it's actually a really big deal.
The problem with it is it ends up being such a good metaphor for like, you know, any sort of I mean, even like, you know, in disagreements where it's like, no, the person really believes that the world, like, I mean, yes, this is when it gets misused, is like, you know, if somebody's telling you something that you're just like, that's just not right, but to them they think it is, then it comes across that way. But like, you know, it only comes with an assumption of what the other person is thinking, and that's the thing, that's the ring that we have to like that we have to throw into the fire. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing that we have to give up, like thinking that we can get into the black boxes of each other's consciousnesses, because we can't. We can tell a lot about people's intentions by what they do through, like, you know, deductive thinking, But it's so easy to turn that deductive shit around and start to like, well, I kind of know how Drew is, so I bet he's doing, something like that. And before you know it, you've created a character that has nothing to do with Drew or Riley or Demon Mama or Steven or whoever we're talking about. And, in your mind, you're like, oh, yeah, no, I know that, like, it's like you might as well be writing a series for HBO or something.
Yeah, and here's the problem specifically with the gaslighting thing, is that once you've started levying, so once you start saying, and I'm not saying Riley's doing this necessarily, I'm just talking about gaslighting in general. Once you start overusing the term gaslighting, and then everything becomes gaslighting, and then someone tries to tell you something's not gaslighting, and then when they try to tell you it's not gaslighting, that also becomes gaslighting. So now you've literally trapped yourself in a essentially an intellectual trap where everything is now gaslighting, including people trying to tell you that that's not gaslighting. You see what I'm saying? Like you've literally trapped yourself in sort of like a circular situation where actually everything, whenever anyone disagrees with you, all of a sudden they're all trying to invalidate your reality, and therefore it's all gaslighting. And that's like a really dangerous road to go down, because you're gonna put yourself in a bubble and isolate yourself and like mess up a lot of your relationships. And once again, I'm not talking about Riley. I don't think that Riley's gone that far. I think that she just was a little confused about this conversation. I don't want to say that that's what Riley's doing. But yeah, just be more. We've got to be careful with these terms. Like psychological terms even for professionals, like we should use them sparingly and specifically. Like and start throwing them out everywhere. It's very dangerous. Very dangerous.
That's the thing, is when like an idea that's, gets out there, but it gets out there without the context that it's really presented in academically or the, background that's necessary to understand that context, then it can just become, worse than useless pretty quickly. Chat says that the book I was talking about is called Conflict is Not Abuse. Wait, I'm going to have to look it up over here.
Conflict is not abuse, overstating harm, community responsibility, and the duty to repair.
Yes.
I need to actually get this.
No, it sounds really interesting. I mean, I'm not endorsing it. I haven't read the book either. But,
right. Yeah, I haven't.
It sounds interesting. It's definitely a topic that's coming up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? Because things are really easy to morally load with all this language and stuff, and I think that we pathologize miscommunication at our own peril. Because truth is, like, I mean, we're gonna have miscommunications, like, right? I mean, we're gonna have them. If you want to talk to people that disagree, we're gonna miscommunicate. We're gonna get upset, especially when the issues matter, right? If we're talking about Donald Trump, someone's gonna get upset, right? Dude's a jackass, all right? He's done a bunch of bad things. And if we're gonna like argue about like who supported him and who voted for him, people are gonna get upset, right? Because it's a very serious matter.
Right.
And in order to actually discuss those topics, we have to be able to say, okay, if we get upset, we're gonna just say we're gonna chalk it up to a genuine misunderstanding, and like try to repair the relationship. And now, obviously, I don't actually really have any relationship with Riley. I've talked to her once, like literally once. I don't know anything about her. I think she's a cool person. But obviously burning the bridge immediately seems unfair. So I even if I requested an unban from her Twitch channel just so I could apologize, and they still haven't granted that. So I mean, that's her prerogative, but I mean, I don't know, she can't hear my appeals because she can't hear them. So
right. Well, I mean, I'll do what I can, and like this isn't to blow up Riley or say that she like I think we both understand why she reacted the way that she did react.
Yes,
and you're going out of your way not to pathologize.
I don't blame her. I don't blame her for a single second. Not at all. Hey, this Twitch politics is toxic as hell, and I think she's been through a lot. And I think that that's totally fine and normal and okay, and it's not her fault, and it's okay. Like I'm like I said a million times, I don't blame her at all. It's whatever. Shit happens. I mean, like, that's just the truth of it. Shit happens.
So the conversation that you're kind of trying to have was about, generally, like, given something, in any particular thing that Donald Trump has said, like, there's an assumption on the left that, like, right-wingers maybe endorse those things more than they do. And then her retort to that was that, well, it doesn't matter, you know, even if you know, say that he's bad for saying that, but you know, vote for him anyway, or you know, make common cause in any way, then it's like, you know, the effect is the same. And that was actually something that you weren't disagreeing with. You just didn't have a chance to express that, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so the reason this point is so important to me is that I get really worried about, so like I'm someone who exists on the right. I get really worried about the right being less and less charitable to the left because they keep feeling mischaracterized by the left.
Yeah.
So like for example, there's a lot of people who voted for Trump who really fucking hated Trump. Like it's just like there's this really shitty situation, and this is, by the way, this is the same for lefties. There's a bunch of people who voted for Biden who fucking hate.
Oh yeah, there's some of them in the chat right now.
But we're sort of stuck in this crappy prisoner's dilemma where we have to vote for the person we think is going to vote for things we like, or the other person's going to win. And so like we're sort of stuck in this situation where there's like a genuine amount of people who are like, I really did not like Trump, and I really think that he says a bunch of really fucked up stuff, but like I cannot let the other side do X policy. And there's a lot of people on the left that are like, look, I don't like Biden's record on like the crime bill, or I don't like his record on things like socialized medicine. I want more progressive, like medicine, like for medicine and healthcare in our country, and he won't do that. But the alternative is Trump. And so like we're stuck in this situation where like we have to vote for somebody. Now I chose to abstain from the top of the ticket last election because I just couldn't do it myself. But the truth is, I only did that because I think it makes me feel better. The truth is, all I did was flush my vote down the toilet, right? And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that because they really care about politics. And my only point about this is like, look, we can't paint the people that didn't like Trump as people that endorse everything, because those people are going to start saying, screw it, I'm just going to vote for whoever at this point because you're going to tell me I'm a terrible person anyway. And I'm afraid of losing those people to like the people who are telling like crazy lies about the left.
Yeah. So there was part of what Riley was trying to get across, the thing that I think she just got frustrated with, you know, because she thought that you know, not granting this point was the only way that you could be this obstinate was just that you're not gonna agree. You're just like, you know, holding your breath, and you know what I mean. You're just like not listening, right? That was the idea that that there's you know, something like racist about the phrase law and order. Right. Now, I think about this, when I think about it, I think of it with different minds. With a left-wing mind, yeah, I get it. I know that like that phrase got used by Richard Nixon back in the 60s. You know, it wasn't just against black people, it was also against hippies. It was also against anybody who's protested the Vietnam War. It was you know, and all he had to say was law and order, but all these associations like automatically came to mind. So I think when Riley said that, you know, a lot of conservatives, maybe not you, but like a lot of conservatives would take that as like, what you're saying is that like when I'm saying law and order, I'm really like, yeah, stick it to the black people. And they're not saying that. They literally know themselves in their hearts that they are not saying that. So that sounds ridiculous. That matches up with the straw man that you were talking about like what the left does. Is they're just going to call you a terrible piece of shit regardless of what you do. And, you know, kind of black pills you know, the people that are already kind of pretty black pilled pretty black pilled already. So it's you know, like I think what she was really trying to get across though wasn't any sort of so, and you're familiar with these terms, right? Implicit and explicit bias. Yes. She wasn't talking about any kind of explicit bias that like to the to the average conservative, that's what that means. I think what she was asserting is that when Donald Trump or anyone on the right or on the left, because we've seen Hillary Clinton use this kind of language too back in the day, uses that phrase, it's a priming. You know, like the term that people are throwing around now, the priming, you know, it's a way of priming people to respond in a certain way. And that she was trying to claim that, like, particularly to right-wingers, law and order when they're thinking of the disorder in their mind, a lot of times it has a black face. A lot of times it has, you know,
Yeah.
and so that it wasn't like, you know, any kind of thing of like, they're just racist and they say this thing and they're thinking racist thoughts when they're saying it. She was really saying that, like, you know, he's kind of Pied Pipering them into, like, you know, activating their worst angels.
And so I want to be super clear. And when I was having the conversation, I
Yeah.
acknowledged I am not a historian, right? So, and so like I'm educated in psychology, and I'm training to be a counselor and a therapist, right?
Right.
That's my area of study. So I
and
am
Stephen's
not aware.
not a historian either. You know, I mean, like, this is some deep political. It's only anyway. I'll explain why I know this crap later. But yeah.
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
so like when she starts bringing up stuff about Nixon, I'm like, you know, it's possible that like in the past things were used this way. It's just, to me, and this, I tried to make this point. She interrupted me on this point because she didn't want. This is the first time she interrupted me. I wanted to make the point. It was like, it's really hard to advocate for laws and law and order without saying something that sounds like law and order. And so it's really difficult. I don't know how you can possibly advocate for laws without.
Well, I understand advocating for a law, and I would posit that Democrats and Republicans advocate for laws.
Yeah,
they just
advocate
different laws.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The right psychologically is more intuitively going to be toward like structure and law and police and these type of things. So they're going to more frequently make appeals to like general order and stuff like that. And I take your point about like priming really serious. So like, obviously I'm educated. I know what priming is.
I figured.
Yeah. And so it's entirely possible that there is some underlying bias that is occurring when people say law and order. People may have a particular picture in their mind that is not an equitable picture. To be perfectly clear, that's entirely possible. I just think that there isn't really a genuine way to get around using terms that sound like law and order. So, like, if we were going to use a
but now there are
other than law
freaking
and order,
communist
I think it
invading
would trigger all
radicals.
the same implicit biases that are there for other things, unfortunately. And so I think that saying that because there's these associations that we can't use this language at all, I think is almost a non-starter, because I think that you're going to have to use some sort of language to make these appeals on the right, because the right cares about these things. And then if you want to address implicit biases or something like that, you have to address them at the root rather than trying to remove the language at the top, because that's like it's almost not even like, you're not even really addressing the issue. You're addressing, it's such a
The way that I will admit, the way that it gets dealt with is pretty shitty, and I know the issues with implicit bias testing and just kind of ridiculous nature of the metrics that we have for that you know, they're so variable. But like, I understand like kind of the issue you know, with that, and that like there's a lot more, I think, that you have to like explain, and like, I don't know, like when you're coming across like you've got racism in your dark little heart, like you said, that's a non-starter. But if you come across like we've all got racism in our dark little hearts, and you know what's cool is that you can become aware of that, and then you can stop yourself from doing the cringe fucking thing that you were about to do because you were walking around like a fool next to the, you know, the edge of a cliff, right? You know, now you can see, oh, there's the cliff. Let's avoid that now, right? You know, it's that's kind of what we're trying to do, is like, you know, in some ways, like, you know, it is painful to acknowledge, you know, this kind of thing, because like we don't have a positive, and it's been a struggle to get to the place where we don't have a positive, or we have a decidedly negative association of racism as a personality characteristic, because it didn't always used to be like that. It was a lot more, you know, accepted. But along with that, then there's like this denial that comes up of like, you know, well, yeah, racism bad, but I'm not that, I'm not, you know, and it's like you can still sort of get you know, that you can still sort of have those processes, like, you know, working their way out in your consciousness without realizing. In fact, I would say almost all of us do in some way.
Yeah, and so what's fascinating about my field is that a part of like learning to be a counselor is that you have to through like assignments and classes address and think about your biases. It's a part of the education, because like, look, if I'm going to be in this field, and I already have done this, none of your clients are going to be from the same culture as you, and you have to be aware of your biases. And one of the projects that was so interesting to me is that like I'm a very introspective person. I try to think about my internal thought processes a lot. And I was doing a project where I was required to like look into some sort of cultural thing that I wasn't aware of. So I looked into like a specific mosque and like some programs that they had involved. And it occurred to me that when I was reading through it, that the mosque had a lot of similar projects going on that were like charity-based projects that like the church that I had was growing up. And what I realized when I was thinking about this was that whenever I had thought about Islam as a religion in the past, my framing had always been thinking about all the ways in which we were different rather than the ways in which we're similar. And so I had never even considered that there was going to be so much similarity between the way that like a mosque runs versus the way a church does. And so like so through this project, I'm like, wait a minute, like, so have I been thinking about the ways that I'm different than people this whole time rather than the ways that we're similar? And it's like, so it's like something like that like you think about it like abstract is like you can have somebody who's like specifically like directed all the time to examine biases and find small little biases like that in them all the time, then certainly everybody has them. And it's almost arrogant to say that you don't have any biases. And the truth is that if you refuse to look for them, you're probably one of those people that has got them everywhere because you're not examining them. And I think that it's really important that we
is that
have
a little
this...
Jungianism I detect, or
I haven't studied a lot of Jung, but I am a psychology guy, so you're probably getting something. But my main thing is like it's really hard because we have to find a way to say racism is bad while trying to remove the moral like condemnation that goes along with it when you say I have a bias. We have to try to extract the stigma while still maintaining that racism is not a good thing. Because because it's really important that we're able to say, you know what, actually I had a bias, but I can acknowledge it because I know that I'm not going to get jumped on and I can correct that. But it's really hard to do that when we feel like as a culture, if I acknowledge this thing, if I acknowledge this, that I'm part of that horrible thing that we used to do to people and still probably do somewhat to people. Like people don't want to be associated with that. So it's really hard. The cognitive dissonance is just too much to acknowledge that you've got some of that in you. So we got to figure out a way to do this in a better way than moral condemnation.
It's definitely a challenge. And that's, it's the kind of thing that I think of every day, narrative, and how to present it in a way where it actually gets through and doesn't get stuck in our defense mechanisms. So somebody had a question. Irene and Drew were just talking about law and order a minute back. Out of curiosity, what reason would a political party have for needing to fight for law and order? That's what I was kind of like trying to probe, was the idea of obviously I don't think either side, at least when we're talking about Democrats and Republicans, it might be different when you're talking about like anarchists or somebody who wants a stateless society, but mostly everyone's in favor of laws and order, I guess, right? Depending on what that means. If order means like a strict hierarchy, maybe not so much. If order means, not getting, mugged on your way to Subway, then, that's probably something that we can all like get on board with. But like, what do you think, how would you describe like the use of law and order as a slogan versus like just like the wanting to pass laws?
So here's the distinction, I think. And I think that what happens is that the left intuitively is okay with bending the rules a little bit to try to do equitable things. So for example, the left is okay. So I think that a lot of people are like okay a little bit with illegal immigration because they know that the people they're fleeing something bad, right? Like if they come here, like we understand why they're coming here. They have good reasons to come here. They want opportunity. They want all these things, right?
Well, so it's generally where the left doesn't agree with like the law that's in place, and they'll be more fungible with the. You could even find some examples where almost everyone is like, no one's gonna like say you're a bad person for doing 3 miles over the speed limit. In fact, most cops won't even pull you over for that.
Right. Yeah, so this is just a good example because I think what I'm speaking to is the intuition here, and I think that the intuition on the left is if I agree with the thing that's going on, then I'm going to sort of push the bounds a little bit, and we can actually just be okay with it and let things slide. And I think that the intuition on the right is like, okay, we have to follow the rules. If we don't follow the rules, we don't have anything. And if we don't want to follow the rules, we have to change the rules. And so, like, for example, when we're talking about, I think a good specific case of this is when we're talking about like riots, because the left really focuses on the emotional and justificational part of the riot. So, like, for example, like it seems like the riots in the past, like in the past year, are a social consequence of something that is very psychologically real for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So like there's a reason that people are doing it, and they feel very justified in doing it.
Well,
But
I mean, I think you got to disambiguate a little bit in that, like, you know, there's a state of mind almost that, and this is a group psychology thing. I have no idea about how this works, but there's like, it seems to be a state of mind that people get into. You can see it looking back into history. You know, you could look back to the French Revolution and stuff like that, where a group of people, you know, becomes, you know, very destructive. And I think the assumption on the right is that whenever that happens, that's like a bunch of bad people getting together.
Right.
In the humanities, which, you know, a lot of right-wingers not so big on, some left-wingers not so big on the humanities these days. Jesse Singal, I see you. Right? No, I'm just kidding. Well, wait, am I? Actually, I'm not sure. We'll have to do more research on that to find out. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot in terms of the humanities and the way that we tend to understand like riots. We understand that this is like a psychological phenomenon.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that there's a different case when what we have instead is like a delicate plan, you know, put in place to capture a specific objective with the intention of, I don't know, either using the members of the government to blackmail the government into, you know, handing over power in an illegal way, overturning the results of a democratically held and you know, pretty highly scrutinized and still very fair election, you know, versus, you know, there's a group of people protesting because something really fucked up happened to somebody, and then all of a sudden, without them doing anything, they've got like, you know, pepper spray coming in. They're running around. They don't know what the fuck is going on, and like, you know, somebody starts to fight back. That's kind of like what started the whole Chaz thing in Seattle, from what I understand. It was, you know, the cops attempt and like usually this works, right? If you apply enough force, if you make a protest situation miserable enough for people, they'll leave. They will get the fuck out, usually, right? But what was happening was like, you know, it's and the idea is with the police, they're like, okay, we'll ramp up the force a little bit more. Are they leaving? Nope. Ramp up the force a little bit more. Are they leaving? Nope. And they have this mentality of like, all we have to do is go to whatever, they're going to have a threshold. When we just have to get to the threshold, and then they'll go away and they'll dissipate and everything will be good again. What happened instead was the police kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. And the protesters were like, no, motherfucker, like this guy was murdered, and he was murdered by a cop. Fuck you, right? And that's what that mentality, you know, is something that I don't know if you can exactly blame on an ideology. And my point always is, when you're talking about a riot, you can't only see the people, the protesters, as being culpable. You've got to talk about what kind of environment they were put into, because that will, you know, determine whether they reach that psychological state. And that's why I don't like subject that psychological state to some kind of ideological analysis. Is it an anarchist thing? No, these people aren't thinking, they are reacting, they are in the moment. I mean, I guess maybe there's some branch of anarchy that's like all about, you know, that frame of mind, but obviously this isn't like a rational place for people to be. And it's not an ideal place. It's not something that my side really wants to engender either, but it is something that we've learned that if people are pushed enough, they will go there.
Yeah, and so to be perfectly clear, I'm not saying that the psychological state that with which someone reaches that level is a left-wing thing. It's not. What I'm saying is that intuitively, the right-leaning perspective on riots is that this is my perspective. I can't speak for everybody. The thing that everybody will say is that they're destructive and they destroy things and people steal things, and those are not okay, and there's real measurable harm that results from them, especially to the communities that are like they get screwed by the riot. Like there's actually a lot of damage. So you have to demand, like, riots are wrong, but they're understandable. And so the people on the left very much focus on why they're understandable, and the people on the right very much focus on why they're wrong and socially destructive. So when you're talking about going back to law and order, you're talking about we have to.
I'm not sure though. I'm not sure you've sold me on the riots are wrong. I've described them as being, or you're saying this is what in the right wing mind frame, riots. There's a, yeah, okay.
So here's what I would say. It's there is real measurable harm that comes when a community, like people go to a community and burn buildings down.
Right.
Because because you're talking about just like, so like the people that are left there have their community destroyed. And that's real measurable harm. And maybe you don't want to say it's wrong for whatever reason, but there's measurable harm as the
Look,
result
if
of
you
it.
could show me that it was like intentional, if you could show me that it was like a person going in with the intentions to like, yes, like, you know, like, but everything that I've seen shows me that it's not about individual psychology, rather it's about group psychology.
It's not at all. Yeah, it's
so how do you make an individual moralistic determination on something that's not even up to the individual?
So I am actually, well, that's sort of complicated because people can be
really
responsible
complicated.
for things. Yeah, so people can be responsible for things even if they're in groups and doing things. But I would say that you're psychologically you're looking at things from a social psychology perspective, and there's an error within social psychology called the fundamental attribution error. And for those that aren't familiar, basically what it means is that you over attribute to the individual what is actually more responsible because of the situation or the environment that the person is in, right? So the why riots are dangerous is because of what exactly you're saying, is that individuals cease to be individuals. They sort of melt into the crowd and they act as a crowd, and that's why things get really dangerous. And that's why things like mob justice are really dangerous, because when you're talking about, like, for example, like really crazy stuff that used to happen in our country where people would just like go and grab a person and just like string them up, that is injustice, and it happens because of this exact type of thing that we're talking about. Mob psychology is very, very dangerous, even though it's understandable. And the individuals that do actions within a mob are like maybe sort of like psychologically less culpable.
I see what you're saying, though, that if we let the person that like actually did the, you know, did the noose, you know, go, then
and to be clear, I think that like if you're a part of a mob that like drags someone out of their house and lynches them, I think you're morally responsible, even if you're not the one that strung them up. Like you still are, you contributed to the mob.
The other thing that sorry, go ahead, I don't want to cut you off.
And I would just say that like it's really important to realize that I think that the right really focuses on the riots have consequences and we can't let them happen, and the left focuses on why they're understandable, and the right is the people that are trying to say, okay, understandable, but we have to say we can't do that as a culture. And that's what like kind of an example of the call to law and order is. Like we're going back to we're okay now, we're going back to the no stealing, we're going back to the no burning things.
Whose tools do you think are going to be more effective in getting us to a place where there's like less riots? I mean, like who do you think that the right wing's like law and order, like because it seems like there are examples a lot like those cops in Seattle that I was describing, where like every single thing is an escalation. It's like, oh, you know what, we just need harder penalties, we just need like longer, you know, jail sentences, we just need, you know, like cops to be able to do more, you know, violence, and just like let them, you know, let Dirty Harry, you know, do his thing, right, and don't ask any questions, right? And that goes to a really ugly place pretty quickly. This is why people are afraid of law and order. Like I don't think it's as bad as now. If you look back in the 80s, like Dirty Harry was a movie glorifying a dirty cop that like because so many crooks were getting away, he would just off people. And then people were like, yeah, I want to see more of this shit, you know, like it's a really scary thing.
Yeah. And so to be clear, I think that both sides have a key part to play here, right? Because I think what the right wants is that they want, and this is why it's important to have two sides. I think that what we need people to say, okay, we need to keep things at a normal, regular, like orderly place. But the extension of that if you go too far, is like we're going to start like looking for people that are potentially doing it. We're going to shut protests down. We're not going to, so that's too far.
Yeah.
But if you want to address the underlying concerns of why the riots are happening, that's the left, right? So like they're going to say, all right, this injustice is occurring. This is what's causing people to come into the state of mind. There's this horrible discriminatory thing going on that are causing people to come out here. This guy was killed by a cop. How do we address? And that's the left. They're addressing the underlying concerns of why they're out there in the first place. So the right says we can't have riots happen, and we have to keep things at like a regular, orderly level. And the left says, but we have to address the underlying concerns because it's not fair that this injustice is going on. And that's why I think we need both sides to have that balance of back and forth of this is not okay, and we have to get back to some level of normalcy. And I think that balance is how we have a culture and how we move forward through time. Because the truth is, if there was only the right, it would just be an authoritarian nightmare. And if there was only the left, there would just be anarchy. But together we have a society. And it's really important that when we have it, I'm sounding like the most stupid fucking centrist in the world right now, but like you understand what I'm saying, right?
No,
Like there's an
I've
actual
definitely heard this like formulation before, that it's like it's almost like a bicameral, you know, idea. It's almost like the idea of our legislation is that, like, you know, there's this discourse there and one side's gonna control the others. The thing that I would say though is that when I look at this particular situation, I see the left's ideas in this regard as being ameliorating. The left is talking about police reform. The left is talking about, like, I'm talking about getting different people in those jobs as cops, because we've attracted, I think, the wrong people to those jobs, and we're creating an environment that perpetuates that. You don't get to be a cop unless you fit in with the fucking Derek you know, Chauvins. Like, you don't get to be a cop unless you're part of that culture. And because of that, it just replicates itself. So that's why my policy is a discontinuity and a professionalization of that occupation to, you know, a true officer of the peace, a true person who might have, you know, some of, you know, the knowledge, some of the stuff that you're studying, and be able to, you know, kind of, you know, think these things through. Now I know how that sounds to people, but the reason that I say this is because when we look at the tactics of the people that we have in there now, we've seen them to not be effective. And the worse things get, the more unfair things get, the more the cops are going to have this response of just like, we got to go harder, we got to go harder, we got to go harder. And the more that's going to promote the actual, I mean, the reason that people took over a block of Seattle, I think it was more than a block, but whatever amount of space of Seattle, the reason that actually happened, the reason that the people overcame the cops, which is not something that's heard of in this country, that does not fucking happen, was not because the cops like stepped back and was like, yeah, I'm just gonna let them, like, they fucking ran out of chemical, you know, weapons to spray the protesters with. They literally could not carry on their battle, and they ceded the fucking territory. Now, as much as like the anarchist in me might, you know, like that, I realize that there's not the, you know, structure, or I mean, I guess structure, you know, not hierarchical structure, but there's not, people aren't ready to take care of themselves like that yet. So I don't actually see, you know, that as something that can be utilized in a positive sense right now, although it might, I don't know, have some sort of a effect down the line, you know, where it makes people, you know, because I mean, under capitalist realism, something like protesters overcoming cops, that's not part of our picture. And now, you know, that kind of is, but like, I mean, the way that it's going is, I feel like, just going to promote more, you know, of this kind of back and forth. And then you have the Chaz, and then the cops pull out and they're like, God, it'd be so nice if some bad shit could happen in this place while we're out of here. Oh, cool. Yeah. You know, like, and it just goes back and forth and we play ping pong forever, when like we do have one side in this case that's got the right ideas, and we got the other side that, I think, law and order, when right wingers say that, I think they want to ramp up. Like, they're like, no, the police need to be, you know, more, you know, hardcore. Like, they just shouldn't have given up on those people. Oh my God, if they tried to hold Seattle, it would have been holy shit, it would have exploded. It would have been a disaster.
And here's the thing, like, I think that George Floyd was a wake-up call for a lot of people on the right. And I think that, like, so for me, I think that some really important stuff needs to happen with the police. Police reform, it has to happen. I mean, period, stop, full stop, it has to happen. And I think that, like, one of the things, I think that the left, like, sort of wasted an opportunity with the defund the police thing, because although I acknowledge that there's a point to it, I think that it actually misunderstands where we should go. Because I think the solution for me, as someone on the right, is that we have to pump a ton of money into training for police and to adding in additional people. So like you're talking about, maybe it's the case that now with the police, we need an additional role for the cops that is a mental health professional that goes along with cops for specific
I think we need
cases.
to reimagine their role in society and reimagine who fills that role. I don't think that the people that we've got right now are the people that we need. And I think that as long as those people are there, we're going to keep having these problems. I don't think they can de-escalate. I don't think they know how.
It might be the case, but the one of the most important things that people need to realize is police are severely undertrained. It's really like, so like when you're talking about like cops, you're talking like training is the most expensive part, and it's the first thing to go. And another thing to keep in mind is that if you want body cams, they are insanely expensive. Because when you're talking about having body cams, and I like them, is that when you have video recording of every interaction that ever happens that is considered evidence, you have to store tons and tons and tons of video data, and that's the issue associated with body cams, is that you are going to have to give extremely large amounts of money to police forces to maintain video evidence from those body cams. And I'm in favor of that, but we have to acknowledge that what we're talking about here is not just a reimagining of the police or a reallocation of funds. We're talking about, like, we have to pump money into the right places for the police. I'm not talking about buying them another Humvee. I'm talking about making sure that they have body cams and just way, way better training. And that's going to be extremely expensive. And if we aren't prepared to have that conversation, then I don't think that the police reform thing is actually going to go anywhere.
Would you believe or agree that there also needs to be like a looking at, like, you know, who's included and who's not included in the police force? That like okay, so
the part of the issue is that being a cop's really hard, and there's not a lot of incentive for people to be there. And I think that if we want cops to be better, we have to pay them more and be more strict with who we let in. And we have to do more assessment processes with the people that are allowed to be cops. And additionally, separate from this, there's a separate problem that's I don't actually really know what to do about, which is that there's an issue with someone mentioned that body cams they don't necessarily solve things, but body cams make it so that there are less complaints against the cops, both because people make fewer false complaints and also that cops know they're on camera. It's harder for them to get away
accountability.
With shit. Yeah, but in terms of the other thing, it's important to what was I saying? I was talking about before body cams. What was I saying?
Oh shit! Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Oh man.
Training.
Okay, training. Training. Fuck! I shouldn't read chat ever again. What was I saying about? So I was talking body cams, expensive.
They're also saying that, like, so chat seems to think that police in the U.S. are already paid a pretty good amount.
No, they're paid I don't actually
have any knowledge of
their average pay is somewhere like $60,000 a year or something like that. And the truth is, for the job, what we want is we want to pay them really high to make sure that they're insane, like high level experts. And what we also need is we need to have more and more police officers so that we have fewer people that are on like their wits end who are actually out on patrol. Because like if you have like a police station that's got doesn't have enough cops, you're talking about stretching thin people.
The same thing that we have in our medical industry, where people are required to work insane amounts of hours. I would definitely agree with that we should minimize, you know, like somebody's like hours as a cop and try to minimize their stress too. I guess, like, I would say, like, you know, I agree with paying them more. This might like piss off chat. Like, I agree with paying the individual officers more, but I also want to have a lot less of them. That requires needing a lot less of them, though. So I'm kind of realistic about that. This can't be like an overnight thing of just like, all right, we're going to get rid of, like, you know, like half of the police force, or, you know, it's got to be something that's like, you know, it's got to be, you know, ameliorating the situation so that there's less need for them, and at the same time, you know, paying them more but reducing their overall numbers, because the amount of intervention that happens in, like, you know, violent confrontational intervention that happens in our society, I think is just out of whack with the rest of the world, with history, and it's not good. And it could be a lot less, right? You know, it's not, you know, that I want to leave cops shorthanded or anything.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned, people are linking some data in chat. The data I was familiar with is like from the area that I live in. So cops are paid less here because the cost of living is lower here. And in other areas, I'm sure that the cops have to be. So like one of the people like posted that like cops in California make $100,000, but like, I mean, you're talking about $100,000 in California, and that can be like, so if you live in San Francisco, as a cop, I mean, that is like, I mean, the truth is that that's really hard to live in San Francisco. Here's the thing. Basically, what I'm saying is that we have to incentivize people coming to want to be cops for us to actually be able to pick and choose who we can have as cops, because we can't have no cops, right? It's not, at this point in time, it doesn't make sense. So we need to incentivize people to want to be cops right now. And because we want more quality.
Well, I mean, like one of those things is to make sure, and I think the thing that's really going to keep a lot of good people out of the police force right now is the fact that if you see Derek Chauvin like killing George Floyd, you know, you start to worry, like, what am I becoming part of? we've got to let people know, like, that are on their way into the police force or whatever, you know, that they can be, oh God, like, I mean, there's the whole, you know, all cops are, you know, under this organization, under this institution, and especially considering how it was founded, I think ACAB, like, is probably a pretty good rule of thumb. Like, right? It's not something that if you are that good cop, you're not going to last long. And you know, like, we got to give them a chance to be able to know that, like, some kind of signal to say that, like, look, this shit that's been happening, this isn't going to happen anymore. Like, this is a new sheriff is in town. You know what I mean? And and he's woke. He's woke.
Here's what I would say about this. Okay, so number one, we need third-party organizations to report things to for cops so that they don't feel like they have to report to their higher-ups about problems. This is something that I've heard from cops, like former cops. So like my mutual friend, I don't know if you're actually his friend or not, Counterpoints. One of the things that he said
Connor.
is that he wanted to be able to go to a third party so that he didn't feel like he was going to be penalized. And I think that that's totally fair. We need third-party organizations. The only thing I would say about ACAB is that I think that the problem with that is that I think that a lot of cops are good people in really bad situations, and then there are evil people that do really fucked up stuff as cops. And so, like, when you say ACAB, you miss a lot of the people.
Well, I mean,
feel are like what, because this is the fundamental attribution error that we were talking about earlier. You're attaching too much to the individual rather than the environment that they're in. If you put someone in an environment where they feel like their life is over if they have to report something, it gets really fucking. Now they should, to be perfectly clear, the right and moral thing to do is to report things. It's just when you put someone in a really bad incentive structure, that they're gonna play out usually within those incentives, and we have to restructure those incentives so that it's really easy and the right thing to do, and easy for people to actually go and report things when bad things happen. Because truth is, alarm bells should have been going off from all those cops that were around George Floyd, because something was wrong there.
Yeah.
And everybody that
and it's just that culture that stopped it from happening, where you absolutely cannot be that person.
Everybody knew in the country looking at that was wrong. Everybody knew it. And
let me put a caveat on my ACAB. I'm gonna say that, like, although that still holds through, like, there is good in bad people and people that are doing bad things. And I guess when I'm saying good or bad in this situation, I'm like, it's kind of more of a functional definition rather than a be all end all, like, you know, well, you know, if they hadn't been, you know, if this force hadn't been, like, they wanted to do it right. But what I mean is that, like, you will be forced to be complicit in fucked up shit if you stay at that job. I don't think there's any getting around that. And I think that the people who are really, like, the Serpico is another 80s trope. I haven't seen any of these fucking movies, but there's all these 80s movies that people just use as shorthand. Apparently Serpico was a cop who reported on other, like, dirty cops, right? And he got shit from the other cops. So I guess the show is about, like, or is it a movie? Is it a show? I'm not sure. But whatever it is, it's about him, you know, getting, you know, the dirty cops trying to fuck with him or whatever. But it's you know, that kind of you know, issue that you won't be allowed to be the good person maybe that you are if you stay in that job. And that the people that are able to stay in that job are less likely to be you know, the decent people that we kind of need in that role in our society. Like, it's super, like, crucial, you know, especially at this moment where there's a lot of America, like, you know, as a white person, you do get a lot of association from birth of the police with good things. You see Paw Patrol, you see police helping people, you know, you get the sense of, like, yeah, you know, like, you know, just like the officer, you know, friendly archetype and stuff like that. If you grow up in another group, you know, where, you know, encounters with police, where your parents have to have a talk with you to say, listen, you're about to start driving, and when you're driving, you're more likely than a white kid to get pulled over. When you do get pulled over, although, like, normally, you know, you wouldn't be on such a, you've actually got to, like, behave within these parameters, and this might not even save you. You might still, you know, you might still, you know, trip the red flag and get, you know, if you're in that community, then you have a very different idea of law enforcement.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like resolving these things and bringing light to how, you know, this law and order, which, like you said, conservatives see as a good thing, is actually like, you know, death to a lot of people. It is injustice. It's almost the inverse of everything that it's supposed to represent.
And here's one of the and I don't want to bring Jordan. I have to bring up Jordan Peterson here just to.
Yeah.
It's a little funny.
He's been brought up here before, so
one of the things that he points out is this is the fact that when you have too much order, this is what happens, right? When you like order is one of these things that can be good or bad, right? And too much of it is fascism. Too much of it is Nazism, right? And when you're talking about like going too far.
When you say order, do you mean hierarchy?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so organizational structure, it doesn't imply hierarchy then. Okay.
Too much structure is it doesn't allow growth. Too much structure is a jail cell, right? Like I mean, like you're talking about like too much. And yeah, so I think that like I mean I think that I you won't ever catch me saying ACAB, but like I understand the sentiment. Although I think that it feels probably pretty bad for cops to
I'm
hear
not
that,
a big fan of it as a slogan, and I can get how it would sound to cops, and I don't think that it's something that, like, in fact, like I probably shouldn't even be saying it to you, but it's just it's such a meme now that, like, you know, it's a common frame of reference.
I got you. Yeah.
But yeah, like I kind of think that it's like, you know, it's like it's more anyway. People probably say it too much and in the wrong places. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to answer a question that was in the chat, and then maybe answer a couple extra ones or ones that you have, and then I'll get going. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. So Corbus Crux asked a question to me about how I would feel about reallocation to funds to social workers / mental health care specialists to pull cops out of situations. So here's the thing. I appreciate that you put social worker / mental health worker, because social workers get like a lot of this for some reason. I don't really know why. My view on this is that I think that there should be a new position within the police that is a mental health trained person that is specifically designed to work in tandem with the police that only does that. That was so like, for example, if you have a person that like you think you need a person like a de-escalation expert. So like one of this type of these roles that we already have is like a hostage negotiator, who's effectively a communication / almost like a counselor. They're very similar to a mental health professional, except they're trained specifically to use empathy. So one of the things, there's a guy named Chris Voss, who's a famous hostage negotiator, and one of the things that he talks about is tactical empathy. So it's the idea that you're going to be an empathetic and understanding person for the reason of getting people out of dangerous situations. So what I would prefer is, rather than having like co-opting like a different position, like a social worker who's designed to like connect people with social resources, or like somebody who's who's trying to be a counselor to like help people through mental health issues, was we could create a new position where people actually go in with who have this like tactical empathy approach, where they are experts in de-escalation for violent situations, right? So you'd want a new position rather than trying to like fit like a square peg into a circle hole.
But
like
you're saying, so in other words, somebody that is part of the police, somebody that's in that culture, and that like that's their life, not somebody that's like, you know, you get called and the squad car comes and picks you up and you ride along. Like, I could see how that would be. And I'm sure the police, like, you know, wouldn't be, criminals deserve empathy, says,
they do.
Tactical empathy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, also like that framing of like, you know, like and that is a tendency of today's, you know, police forces to look at whoever they're dealing with as perpetrator. The perpetrator is the word that they'll use, and that's like more correct. But like really, perpetrator kind of means criminal, and like, you know, thinking of it in that in those terms rather than citizen. I see a citizen before me, and like, you know, we gotta, you know, the citizen might be doing something dangerous, so let's, you know.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really hard is compassion burnout, right? When you see so much bad stuff all the time, it's really easy for your empathy to literally run out. It's and this is a consequence of people not having as much break, and not having time to recover and do self-care and have like mental health care associated with like with being a cop. It should be built into the system that every like police department has a mental health professional there that just treats the cops, to help like make sure that they're taking care of themselves, that they don't get that empathy burnout that a lot of cops experience. So there's a I mean, I could talk all day about
What do you
this.
think about this policy? Have you ever heard of broken windows? It's a
Yeah. So broken windows policing for me is a purely empirical matter. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, get rid of it. Because if it's the case that like for some reason like ticketing people for jaywalking actually makes crime, I don't know why it would. I don't like it. To me, it sounds almost silly that
I think
would.
it is based more on conventional wisdom than it is on like
Yeah,
research. From what I understand, though, if anybody has research on it, like hit me with it. So
yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I think that within the context of, I think it was the Destiny and Vosh debate that they had with two like Nosbol guys or whatever
oh god,
they
yeah.
were. I think that they brought up broken windows policing, and I think that what Cora Saras is saying here is correct. Is that there isn't. I don't think that there's actually any research that indicates that when you actually separate for variables and stuff, that actually broken windows policing actually works. I think that what they're saying is correct, but I haven't seen the data personally. But from what I understand, it doesn't work. But for me, it's just an empirical matter. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. And if it doesn't work, and we're doing it, then it's just like literally just ticketing people in poor communities and just furthering inequality for no reason. So like, don't do it. Like if it's a bad thing, don't do it. Yeah. So that's my opinion on broken windows policing.
Was there any other? Did you say you had another question you wanted to answer from chat, or?
If people can ask me any like 2 or 3 more questions if they want, that's up to them. But if there's no more questions, I'm happy to go.
Anybody else in chat have?
Yeah. Any more questions? If not, then I'll get out of here.
Well, I'm glad we could kind of like recapture this, conversation that you were about to have with Riley, and maybe one day you'll have with Riley. Riley, if you're watching, I would love to have a conversation with you. Like I said, I don't I don't think badly of you. I think that maybe you misunderstood Drew's intentions. But I understand why, and I understand what you've been through, and I think that a lot of people have said some pretty unfair things about you. And, it's my intention to I don't think either of you two are bad people. I think you could have a conversation safely. I don't think anybody's trying to just fuck the other person over here. But, again, I understand that if you don't feel safe, you don't feel safe. And, because of the demon mama thing, if you don't feel safe coming on with me, I understand that too. And I respect that and wish you, I think we both wish you the best. So, yeah.
All right, I got a couple questions, but first I'm going to read off Genshin because I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, this is right.
I'll say it.
They want to. If you have a chance, Genshin, I think would like to DM with you if you're interested in that.
Yeah, DM me on Twitter if you want. It's just Drew Welty on Twitter, DREWWETY. I'll answer your DM. That's fine. I'll say it. I'll fucking say it as of today. Drew is my favorite right winger. Hell yeah, brother. Okay, so Vamps. Question for Drew. It felt like you and RGR were getting caught in a meta debate about the direction of the debate was taking, while your actual points became misplaced. How frustrating is a situation like this? And thinking back, is there anything you wish you could have done differently? So the problem is that when you're, for me, I felt like I was getting interrupted a lot, and Riley was upset. And the truth is that if you're not going to have the meta conversation, then the actual conversation can't proceed. And I think that if you're having a meta discussion, it can get very frustrating when things start happening. Like one moment in particular was frustrating for me. Was she was asking me to remember specifically what she said about a particular point, which is borderline impossible when you're having a heated conversation. That being said, I think the only thing I regret from the discussion was using Riley's name when it was upsetting her. I didn't realize that it was upsetting her. But that's the main thing that I regret, was using her name and upsetting her that way. But it's very frustrating when you have to have a meta discussion. You're already very frustrated because you're talking about how bad the conversation is going.
Yeah. No, I can understand, because it's kind of like, you set out to have this conversation, but you find out that it's almost like, when you go out to do something and then you realize, wait a minute, I can't go outside. I can't go to the grocery store until I find my mask. Let me go figure out where I left my mask. And then, the thing that that you need to do right now, you can't do because there's perfunctory stuff that's like getting in the way.
Yep.
So yeah, it's really frustrating. I feel you about like, though, like that some of that setup is necessary as far as at least getting on the same wavelength, the same page as far as what you're talking about, because otherwise it is so easy to talk right past each other, and you could even agree. And you can I've had total disagreements with people I agree with on Twitter just for reasons like that.
Yeah, totally. What causes crimes, Drew? That's actually that's fucking complicated. So, I'll go back to Peterson. Peterson thinks that inequality causes crime. So there's this thing called the Gini coefficient, which is like a statistical indicator of inequality. And I've heard him talk about how that poverty doesn't cause crime, but inequality does. So if Jordan Peterson is to believe inequality, I haven't seen the data on it myself, but I think that there's a lot of things that cause crime. I think that I think it has a lot to do with.
He means economic inequality, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, economic inequality. And I assume he would probably also mean probably just like systemic or like justice, like judicially wise. Like if you don't have equal rights, maybe that inequality causes it too. But I think the Gini coefficient is specifically economic. But for me, in terms of crime, it's possible that inequality contributes to it. I think that I think it's mostly systemic issues when you're talking about crime. So like if you have a situation where you're talking about like communities that have been like essentially culturally genocided, and be like screwed into a particular circumstance, it's entirely possible that you get like this sort of self-feeding cycle of the only opportunities are the illegal ones, and now you have to do those, and now you're in jail, and now there's less people in there because they're in jail, and now you have to do it again, and so it's like very cyclical systemic problems that come.
Oh with, wow! So it really does kind of come. He's really saying like material conditions here.
Yeah.
But not in a culturally Marxist way, chat. Yeah. Not those kind of material conditions. The other kind. So the kind that can get addressed by capitalism, the great equalizer. But yeah, we'll have to save that conversation for another day. Drew, you're somebody that I totally enjoy talking to, and I love being able to get into this meta thing of the right and left, not just like, what do we think, but what do we think that each other thinks, and what do we think that the general right winger, left winger, and kind of correcting some of those misperceptions, because I think it is really easy to have a straw man version of your opponents, and that's not good for you as a debate lord, and that's not good for your opponent as a having real discussions requires, like you said, that perfunctory work of getting on the same page, and even if it's frustrating and painstaking, it's worth it. So I'm glad that there's people like you on this platform that I can talk to and have percolate these ideas, not just within our own silos. So
sure.
Wonderful to talk to you, and say hi to your doggo. My chat loves your doggo, Lizzie. You want to say hi? Oh, Lizzie says hi.
That's my corgi, Lizzie. I'll answer this last question, and I think that will be good. So I have one question for Drew. I know many conservatives here in California who don't like gun laws and willingly ignore them and break the law. I'd say that lawlessness is selectively embraced on both sides of the aisle. What do you think? So I would say, so here's the thing. I think that those people would probably be referring back to the Constitution as like the grounding for things, and they would say that like, oh, these laws are unconstitutional, therefore I shouldn't have to follow them. That's sort of a complicated conversation about I don't know how I feel about that. This is something that I think about to myself a lot. Like, what type of law would I disobey if I thought the law was stupid? Because like one of the things is like a lot of us break speeding laws because it's sort of silly, but like at the same time going 15-20 over is dangerous. So it's sort of a hard, like weird, blurry thing at the edge of laws, or when we think laws are unjustified, because obviously laws don't determine morality, but we do have to exist within some sort of structure. So that's a really hard conversation. I would have to think about that more. I think for me, if I was in that situation, I would probably just move, or try to do like advocacy, because you're still operating within a government where you can actually change things. So yeah, as long as you can try to change the system meaningfully or move, I think that it's probably better to not have illegal firearms. That's just my view on it, but maybe I'm too far left for those right people, because I would probably just move. That would probably be what I did. Oh, this might be a good question though. Although independent of the Republican Party, what do you see as the role of conservatism as a political ideology? What differentiates it from the left besides being on the right? So the right is very different psychologically from the left. So they have different intuitions than the left do. So there's a whole wing of psychology called moral psychology, where all they do is they just study the differences in morality between people or differences in moral intuitions of people. One of the leading researchers in this area is Dr. Jonathan Haidt. People may have heard of him. And he studied the differences between the left and right intuitively in terms of their moral intuitions and found that the right, broadly speaking, cares about harm, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity, and also liberty. So those are the 6 moral intuitions, the 6 moral taste buds that the right has.
So it's like a virtue ethics based kind of thing?
It's not virtue ethics. It's just simply, so basically you test people for their intuitions, you test them, and you can actually see where they measure on these things. It's just a purely psychometric or assessment based thing.
Oh yeah, but as far as these constructs, like where they're coming from, like
I actually don't know how to answer that question. I'm not brushed up on my virtue ethics terminology.
I only had to because of Steven, but yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, but the left cares about harm and fairness. That's what you need to know about the left. So the left focuses on 2 or and also a little bit of liberty. So they focus on like roughly 3 moral intuitions, while the right focuses additionally on loyalty, authority, and sanctity, or sanctity is sometimes known as purity. So like restricting your own actions. So like this is like where like a lot of the sexual morality comes from, is the purity moral intuition. And so with the right and left having these different intuitions, what you see is that the role of conservatism is a lot of socially group oriented things. So the authority, loyalty, and sanctity things they're like the intuitions that bind people together into groups. So if you're on the left and you ever feel like, man, the right is just better at staying in groups and doesn't have as much infighting, you're correct. Psychologically speaking, that's supported because the right views loyalty as a highly valuable moral thing. So if you're wondering, how can the right just attach themselves to Trump and never let go of him no matter what, it's because they highly value loyalty. Even though he's a crazy person, they will hold on for dear life. So
yeah, I guess the mystery to me has always been like why the loyalty gets directed in the places that it does. With Trump, his loyalty is transactional. That's how he operates. If you watch his back, he'll kind of watch. I mean, if you watch his back and then you're still useful to him, then he'll watch yours, right? It's sort of how it works with him. And he rewards people who, help him, and he punishes people who, hurt him. And but with the right wing, I don't know if you could say that Trump, that they're responding to Trump, heaping all this like helpful stuff on them, because, he'll just as easily throw you under the bus a lot of times. But I guess there's a way to earn his trust and respect. You just can never go against the family if you do.
Yeah, but, so Trump is a very strange individual. I'm talking about like the right writ large, and so like one of the things that I advocate for is that the right has to be more strict with who they vote for. And the reason I advocate for this is that if we're going to be the party that highly values loyalty to the people we vote for, we cannot attach ourselves to people like Trump. We just can't. It's too dangerous. We just can't do it. We have to attach ourselves to people that are at the minimum good people. So we can't attach ourselves to people who are willing to just spread massive misinformation because they can't handle the fact that they lost an election, even though it was fairly decided, right? Too dangerous. We can't do it on the right. So that's really what I'm talking about. And if you want to learn more about like the differences between the right and left psychologically speaking, and why there might be an important difference between those things, Sarah, look up Jonathan Haidt's a TED talk on moral psychology, and he talks a little bit about how civilization, part of the reason we have it is because of the group oriented moral intuitions and stuff like that. So if you want to learn more about that, look into Jonathan Haidt's TED talk.
The one thing that I wanted to make sure to ask you about, and I thought about this when Destiny mentioned it, though, is like, okay, so have you noticed that, I don't know if you'd be able to gauge this, but I'm just curious if there's people who've gotten into psychology because of Dr. Peterson. Like, how common is that? Like, do you think that there might be like a whole bunch of people that got kind of turned on to these ideas or curious about these ideas from reading him that might see that as, might take that as a direction to go because of that?
I actually don't know. So I got into psychology before Peterson was a thing. So I was probably 2/3 of the way through my bachelor's before Peterson became a thing. It was sort of cool for me because like I I never thought there was going to be like a mainstream psychologist, because like that's like sort of like a different thing. But I actually don't know the answer to that question. What I have noticed is that most of the people that I'm around, and most of the clinicians that I have been around, or like students or peers, most of them have a positive opinion of Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
Even though almost everybody in the field is progressive, like, so like I'm very much in the minority because I'm conservative. I'm not going to pretend like most people are not conservative in my field. But even though people are like sort of progressive, it's still like there's a lot of positive opinions of Peterson. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's very weird, because like the progressive critiques of him don't really extend into a lot of like the people that are in the community, which is very strange. I don't know. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't like him. I'm just saying, every time I've heard somebody voice their opinion about him, they're like, I just like really like that guy. He's really cool. I really like his psychology stuff, and
Yeah.
so it's sort of interesting. I wonder if the negative critiques of him are sort of limited to more online communities. So like a lot of like the regular people that are like kind of just engaging with his work don't see the critiques, because most people kind of have a positive opinion with him in the community. I'm not really sure why. Destiny had a point to make about like that he thinks that people within the psychology community have like sort of a disconnect with how regular people view things.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. I might make a video on it, because I've been thinking about it. And you might actually have a point. It was like one of the more interesting criticisms he had for me based on that conversation. So that's a whole another rabbit hole. But I'm going to be thinking about that a lot, moving away from this conversation with RGR and stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm actually thankful for, like, because I feel like Peterson's, I don't know if he realizes it or not, but he's sort of redirected a bunch of like right wingers towards the humanities, which has been like sort of kryptonite. It's been a territory that, like, there's a lot of right wingers that just like, if you listen to them, they don't think the field should exist. They'll say it's soft science and it's bullshit. And granted, there may be differences in like replicability between different sciences, but it's kind of nice that, like, he's making the stories, the narratives, the humanities, and the like literacy of them, kind of cool, amongst a crowd that, like, in some ways I'm just amazed by it, because I feel like Peterson is saying in a lot of cases the same thing that some woman has said to these guys, whether it's their mom, clean your room, or it's their teacher, read Joseph Campbell, right? And like they don't want to hear it from these women, but like, Peterson, if Peterson says it, they'll listen. So
Hey,
I mean, whatever gets you to where you need to go, that's
you know what, Irene, a representation matters. It look, if you hear it from somebody that you can identify with, it does matter. And maybe it's the case that we shouldn't discount things from people that are different from us, but like, I mean, it's the truth. Like hearing things from people that with messages, like hearing messages from people we identify with is really important.
right.
And so like having like male teachers, for example, is like really important for young men, and like even like having like more representation in media is really positive. And even though people on the right don't like to concede that, because maybe we shouldn't care about it, maybe it shouldn't matter who it comes from, it does. It matters that we identify with the people we see. And you know what, that's just part of it, unfortunately. But I mean, it's whatever. I mean, like, I'm glad that I hate the anti-intellectual, anti-education crap on the right. The whole like, don't go to college is a waste. It's crap. College is really good. If you can afford to go, then go.
Yeah.
And if you can afford to take out a loan and pay it back with whatever your degree is, it's really important. And the anti-intellectualism drives me crazy. Like we need people in the regular workforce, and we need tradesmen and stuff, and that's all super important. It's really good paying jobs and stuff, but college matters too. Okay.
And the idea that people that do a job like that don't have any interest in, like at least, learning some of the same things, like learning of the great, books, learning of the classical world. I mean, like, yeah, it might not be like, I don't know, the idea that, like, that there's a group of people that like, no, all you need to like study is like electricity and diagrams, or all you need to study is how masonry is constructed. It's like I don't think anybody's like you know, that one dimensional. And it would be nice going forward also for like some of the, you know, wealthier people that are accustomed to doing all the creative jobs. Maybe it'd be nice if they could branch out a little bit and try, you know, some extra, you know, tasks too, so that like, you know, the something like cleaning the toilets or like emptying the waste baskets doesn't always fall on one person who's then like, you know, rewarded with a lower pay rate than everyone else. But no, you've been super generous with your time, and thank you so much, Drew. Like I said, Drew is a right-winger that I love to talk to. We don't always agree. There's a lot we disagree on, but I think we always learn something from each other. So it's been nice having you on here. And
thank you so much for having me. This has been like one of the most positive talks I've ever had on Twitch. So really thanks for having me. This has been so much fun. And anytime you ever want to have me back on, feel free to shoot me an invite and I'll let you know if I can make it.
Absolutely.
It's been great. So thanks everybody for the questions, and thank you so much for having me on your platform and stuff. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for coming.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.